Hey everyone, it's Donna here again, inviting you to today's self-love reunion speaker, and I am super excited. First, I invite you to hit the subscribe button, and just to remind everyone, this self-love reunion was put together because 1 in 2 women across the globe actually have more self-doubt than self-love. This reunion is here to help transform and help people get into that space of deeper self-respect, because love is the most powerful force in existence. I'll see you on the inside. Hello, everyone. It's Donna here again with the Art of Self-Love Reunion, here to revitalize the human spirit during these incredible times. With me today, I have a very special guest that I am super excited to spend some time with. The gentleman that we're going to meet with next is Amos Clifford. He's the founder of the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy Guides and Programs. He is also the author of the best-selling book, Your Guide to Forest Bathing, Experiencing the Healing Power of Nature. A student of Buddhist philosophy and Zen meditation for over 25 years, Amos founded the Sky Creek Dharma Center in Chico, California, where he emphasized the importance of meditation practice in wild places. He is also the founder of the Center for Restorative Process, where he has led the inquiry into how the principles of restorative justice can inform ways to heal the broken relationships between humans and the more than human world of nature. Amos, welcome so much. I am super excited to have you here. I am a nature spirit, shall we say, and a lover of all things Mother Nature and this planet. So I am thrilled to have you join me and share everything. You're so knowledgeable about this. So welcome. You're in Arizona now, but this is great.
Yeah, thank you, Donna. And I just want to say, my wife's in the kitchen making some tea for me, and so there may be some background noise from that.
No problem. So let's get
for
right
a little while,
underway.
but I really appreciate the invitation to be here. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah. Great. And I am super excited to have you share what forest bathing truly is all about, how it started, from the practice, the science, and then we delve right into things. So what can you share with the audience?
Okay, so first of all, forest bathing, sometimes when people hear that term, it's a little confusing, and we've heard stories from some of our guides of people showing up to go on a walk with their bathing suits because they think they're going to bathe in the forest. And that's a lovely practice, to bathe in the forest, but it's not really what we're talking about. What we're talking about is really slowing down and using all of our senses to become aware of the forest environment around us, and at the same time really become aware of ourselves. So anytime you're in your senses, it's in a sensory perception is always immediate. It's always here and now. Like whatever I'm touching right now, if I touch my hands, put them together and I notice that sensation, that's in this moment. Well, we do that in the forest using all of our senses, and that's what we train our guides to do, is really slow people down to bring them fully present into their bodies and into the forest. The origins of this practice, I would have to honor the people in Japan who in the 1980s coined the term Shinrin-yoku. Shinrin-yoku means essentially forest bathing, Shinrin meaning the forest, and yoku bathing. And if you see the Japanese character for it, it's a bunch of little trees with a bathtub and water splashing out of it.
So I love that. And thank you for pronouncing it, because I struggle with the how do you say that. So thank you.
Oh yeah, if you look at the first video I made on it, I totally mispronounced it all the way through it. So, but we've had a chance to go to Japan a couple times now, meet with a lot of the guides and the researchers there, but we're also meeting with people all over the world who have different practices and different ways of going into the forest for meditation or for well-being. I think it's really an ancient practice. You know, you mentioned that I founded Sky Creek Dharma Center, and when I was there, I had a little practice that I called Coyote Zendo. And basically what I would do is email my friends and say, hey, meet me at such and such a time at such and such a trailhead. So we'd go to the trailhead, we'd meet, walk a little ways in, we'd sit and meditate. And back then I was still doing a very formal meditation, ringing a bell and burning incense and doing some, chanting a sutra and then sitting quietly and still. And I don't really do that kind of meditation anymore because the forest bathing is itself such a powerful meditation. But as I've done it, I've thought about this, the story, the legend of the Buddha as it's come to us, how the Buddha essentially was a forest monk, wandered in the forest, and at the moment of his enlightenment, he was sitting beneath a bo tree. I don't know if you remember that, but he's sitting beneath a bo tree. And before I started this practice, I thought, well, that's just a story. It just happens to be the setting. But now I feel like that's probably an essential part of the story, that there's something about the relationship between the human being and the other than human beings there. So there was the bo tree, there was the snake, there was the storm, and then at the moment of enlightenment, even touching the earth, and saying to the earth, bear witness to this is what the Buddha said. And so I just point this out, not to go down the path of any religious or spiritual teaching here, but to point out that this kind of forest practice has a very long tradition in many different forms. And so I became interested in this in around 2008. I went through a series of kind of deep inner work that involved a couple of 12-day vision fast ceremonies. And on those ceremonies, I really was taking the question as I'm coming into my elder years, what can I do to be of service? And so, the first time I was out on the land, so in these 12-day ceremonies, there's a lot of time preparing, like figure it's 4 days of preparation and 4 days and 4 nights of solo fasting on the land, and then 4 days of reflecting in a group, with professional guides. And and I did this work with a place called School of Lost Borders. That first fast, I really held that question, what can I do? And then a year later, I was back out on the land and I got some real clarity. And the clarity had to do with, whatever my work is, it's essential for our times right now that we remember our fundamental relatedness with the more than human world, with nature. And so I wanted to find a way to connect as many people as I could meaningfully, with more than human world. So it's about relationship. Thank you, Michelle.
It certainly is, and I love it. And I am absolutely okay that you speak of what is the spiritual side of it, because for me, it's not religion, and it doesn't take that form. It truly is allowing us to understand our spiritual development and who we are. So let's share a little bit about it, even as we know it's a practice, and we'll delve into that a little bit more because I want you to share the book and how you might take someone on a bit of a journey. But what about the science behind it? Because people always love to know the science behind it, even though as we embark in it, you sort of, once you start to understand and integrate things for yourself, you don't necessarily need the science in the same way because you're able to feel into, and as you're saying, use all those senses and truly become that. But let's talk about the science a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm actually in touch with researchers all over the world now who are studying this and with new questions and going deeper into what's already been studied. But the main things that we see when we look at the existing scientific literature is that people who do this practice have very clear markers of stress reduction. So some of those are things like salivary amylase. When I've done walks in Japan, very often at the beginning of the walk, you'll do a little measure of saliva at the beginning and then at the end, and they're looking at salivary amylase, which is an indicator of acute stress. And the idea is that you'll relax, and over the walk, the amylase will go down. They do things like heart rate variability. So heart rate variability just means that this incredibly intelligent organ we have with the heart is constantly adjusting, making micro adjustments from moment to moment to our environment and to our body's needs and so on. And so there's this micro variability in the rhythms of the heart. Well, when we're stressed, it becomes much more like a metronome. It doesn't vary so much. So heart rate variability is a really clear and good indicator of the state of our nervous system. If we're in a good relaxed state, or if we're in a distressed fight or flight state, that's the metronome and heart rate variability. Well, every study that looks at this finds that we have a big reset in our stress level, and we come back to a healthier baseline. We're feeling less stress, and some of the benefits of that, like psychologically, we can become more creative. We have more access to our imaginations, our creativity, to problem solving, and so on. Physically, this is a really important finding. Our immune response is strengthened. So imagine right now, this time of pandemic, what's a good thing to do for the pandemic? Go walk in the forest. One of the ways that's measured is the particular types of cells associated with immune response increase measurably from even a 2-hour walk in the forest, and that increase can persist for up to a week, or if you spend a couple of days in a forest environment, like on a relaxed retreat, there's still measurable traces of that 1 month later. Wow. It's just a really good practice. And for me, like I just moved to this new city that I'm living in, Prescott. And moving is so stressful. I was feeling very stressed. And my wife and a friend of ours and I went for a walk on this beautiful little forest trail. I'd say we spent an hour and a half on it. And the shift in my mood was just palpable. It was just so strong and so healing. And part of what I felt along with that was this incredible sense of gratitude that this forest trail, that's kind of a perfect trail, is literally a 10-minute drive from this house that we just moved into. And we, as it happens, we moved into a neighborhood called Forest Trails onto a street called Forest View. So
of course you did.
It's all working together somehow.
The universe knows. You know, it's something. So I like you. Well, I won't say like you, because I don't know if you do it every day, but it is so key for me. I spend a morning walk, right? If I don't get it in the morning, I definitely make a point afternoon or evening. And I'm often I take such pleasure in sharing that with people that I know, and they find it difficult in different seasons and all of that. So there's a couple things I definitely want to touch on. One, you know, you speak of being there in an hour and a half, and that's beautiful. I love to. Not everyone will take that time, has necessarily the time to take. How much time do we need? And even in that practice, you're saying still come into that centered moment instead of just out for a walk and I'm doing the thing. So let's talk about that, because that builds into what you're teaching guides to share with people, right? But we as just individuals, whether you live alone, whether you live with a family, how you integrate all that. So let's talk a bit about that, because it's not just about getting out in nature, people. It's living and integrating yourself into nature as a practice, right?
Yeah, in a way, I think it's just paying attention to nature around you and trying to develop the habit of doing that. Like, I'm not outside right now, but if I look outside the window right in front of me out there, I'm seeing these beautiful trees. They're covered with snow. Now, I can have them in my visual field and not pay attention, but if I spend a moment to just pay attention, that makes a difference. And, some people don't get outside much at all, but say they're tending a plant or two in their house and they're getting to know those plants as individuals and getting to know what those plants are asking for, what they need to take care of. Well, that's nature connection. I think even our little house cats that we have running around here, every now and then I look at them and I think, my God, there's an animal living right here in the house with us. And that's pretty amazing. And that feels good, right? Now, the thing about the guided forest therapy walks is that we're teaching the skills of being present. And what I recommend to most people, go do 3 of these walks with a guide. And but what I hear back from people often is that even one walk changes forever their way of being in nature. So I've heard this from a number of people. It's very unusual way for most people to experience nature. I tell you, if you came on a guided walk with me, in 3 hours, we would go maybe 200 yards, 200 meters, right? Maybe we go that far, and it would be very full because we're not in a hurry. Part of what we say is that this practice is much more about being here than it is about getting there, right? And so what we do is we actually manage to arrive right where we are and to fully arrive and to become much more attuned to the incredible pleasures that are all around us all the time. And I'll say that also in our way of force therapy that we developed here at ANFT, we do call out specifically the experience of pleasure and of enjoyment. So, most meditation practices will say to treat all mental, psychological, emotional phenomena equally, to not get attached to any of them. And so pleasure shows up, in classic Buddhist meditation, eventually you learn to see it begin, you watch it arising, you watch it fading away, watch it departing. And you do that from this place of equanimity where you're not really being attached to it at all. You're just letting it go with the knowing that in the next minute, something else will come. Well, in our practice, the way I like to say it is, we slightly privilege the experience of pleasure. And one of the reasons for that is that pleasure is a really good way to connect with the world around us. And we may not consciously notice this, even though most of us are quite unconsciously aware of this, that there's a constant stream of pleasure being offered to us in the sights and the sensations, the sounds of the natural world all the time. And so, that's a piece of our practice also.
I love it. That's my life. That's why when I came across your work, I was like, oh my God, I need to talk to this man. It is, I think, and the more people do it a little bit, and absolutely appreciate not everyone can get out. I like you, believe, have some plants, talk to them, look at it, as much as find a picture on your screen. We're on apps and things all the time. Soften into that. But let's talk about on this journey, because I think we are we know we're in incredible times. Some countries, some cities, whatever, let you out. Others want you left inside. Everywhere is different. But when we go on one of these walks, and as you are teaching guides, because you have gone over the world, I mean, your organization is training people around the world. So I would love to hear a couple things. One, where are some of the most interesting forms of nature that you've come across? And two, even in that 200 yards that you speak of, because I get that. Do you invite people to take off their shoes, sit, engage? Because I know for me, that healing effect comes right up in and through me. So talk about that, because I'm a tree hugger, I'm a tree toucher, I speak to them, so I get it. But for people that don't,
Yeah.
Really hear it from someone like yourself, please.
Yeah, well, we've developed a particular approach that we call the standard sequence. So that we train guides to basically repeat the same pattern. So I think of it as a container that defines the practice, but it's specifically developed so that the guides can be creative, bring their own voices into it, be responsive to the people that they're with, to the environment, to the weather, and all of that. There's a particular pattern that we follow. And yeah, you mentioned that we're global now. We have guides in 65 countries now. We've trained, I think, about 1,500 guides, and that's from our first training was in September of 2014. So we have a really great group of trainers who are also spread around the world. And before COVID hit, the way we would train is we would gather for a pretty intense week in a forest environment with a training team and up to about 22, 24 people. And then we would do a basic training there, and then there'd be a 6-month mentored practicum after that. And then when COVID hit, we shifted, and now we basically put the whole training into a 6-month remote guided curriculum. So our trainers are working really hard with cohorts of about 30 people now. And then with a requirement that for certification that when COVID's over, that people gather for an immersion. And so hopefully that'll be possible sometime this year or next year. Now, the way the standard sequence works is, can I just walk you through what it would be like if,
Please.
Okay,
I would love it, yeah.
So, I've always guided at this place called Sugarloaf Ridge State Park in Sonoma County. And here in Arizona, I'll find my new place. But I'll tell you, one of the things, you asked about, interesting environments. Where I lived in Sonoma County, there's redwood groves. And a lot of people would say, oh, I want to walk among the old redwoods. And I would guide there sometimes, and people would have very satisfactory experiences, but that was not my favorite place to guide, because what I look for is biodiversity and redwood groves culture. Yeah. Now
you broke up. You just broke up a little bit there. Will you say that again? I think you said where we left was you didn't prefer the red grove the same.
No, I don't, because what I prefer is biodiversity.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Right. So I prefer a lot of different species, and the redwood groves, particularly, actually, the older the growth, the more of a monoculture they are. There are multiple species, but it's not like, a lot of times what I like to guide on are the ecotones, the places where two different kinds of environments meet. The meadow meets the forest, meets the creek, meets the steep hillside. And Sugarloaf Ridge had that for me. So I really liked guiding there. Now, the way the experience would unfold is I'd meet people in a parking lot, and there's always some paperwork to do. It's a profession, and like others, and so we have our release forms and that kind of thing that the guides use. And then we begin by usually walking a little distance into the forest, and then stopping and usually just gathering in a circle. And I like to begin by just noticing where we are, because it's amazing how often we don't even just notice that our bodies are right now occupying this space in this context with these people around us and this forest and so on. And you just notice that. And sometimes I'll invite people, share some of the things you're noticing. And then, still standing in a circle, we go into our first invitation, which is called Pleasures of Presence. People who've done Vipassana meditation are familiar with something like this, when you do sort of the body scan and the sense scan, and you're just noticing what your body's experiencing. But we'll basically walk through the 5 ordinary senses, and just just invite people to notice what they're smelling and hearing and that kind of thing. And we have a lot of particular language that we used to do that, what we call the language of invitation. And everything's an invitation. We make that really clear at the beginning. If it's not working for you, don't do it. Find what works for you. And then after we go through the five senses, or mixed in with that, sometimes we'll use other senses too. So sometimes it's just noticing the sensation of your body, the weight of your body on the earth. I like to use imaginal invitations where we're really using the imaginal sense. So, you know, an example of that might be noticing or bringing with your imagination, bringing into being a sense of tendrils, like sensors that reach from your feet down in the earth, like roots, and explore, and to just go on an imaginary journey, exploring that, and what is it like to be rooted and to be able to move, and what do your roots contact. You know, so there's really an infinite number of these imaginal kinds of invitations that we can do. And then from that, we always share. So we get people in a little circle and we just ask them a really simple question. The question is the same every time. What are you noticing? So we've tried a lot of different questions, and this one really works. What are you noticing? And after everyone speaks briefly, then the next invitation we do, we call What's in Motion. And what's in motion is just going for a very slow walk. So the guide usually goes in front to set the pace, because it's hard for people to slow down. So imagine in 15 minutes or 20 minutes going, you know, maybe 60 yards or so. And the reason we call it What's in Motion is because the invitation is to notice what's moving in the environment around you. Now, this is simply, you know, one way to relate this to meditation practice would be, in meditation, usually you choose an object of concentration or focus. A lot of times it's just a sensation of breath going in and out of your nose as you're sitting there. And we're doing a similar thing, just giving the mind something to anchor to that's right, knowing that the mind will wander while people are walking slowly. And however, having said that, I want to emphasize one of the things I train the guides in is let's not tell people that this is meditation. Let's not tell them that it's mindfulness. And the reason to avoid doing that is, now, I know this from my own history of being a meditation student and then teaching later. Everyone has their idea of what meditation is, and they try really hard to start doing what they think meditation is, what they should experience.
Yeah.
Let's just leave that behind. We don't need that. All we have to do is pay attention to what's around us. We don't have to name that meditation. Even though the experience, I think any experienced meditator would say, wow, I think I've been meditating the last 2 hours. And I have people say that to me frequently. And I just, yeah, great, if that's your experience. So we don't want people to be caught up in an effort to make meditation happen or to make mindfulness happen. So I just say to guides, hey, please just, leave that out of the discussion. And we just go directly there without having to name it. And then, so we do what's in motion. We gather again for a circle, and then we do, the guide might do one or two more invitations that are often involve the imagination. So, you said you talk, I think you just said you talk to trees sometimes. Do you do that? Yeah, see, talking to trees is just such a powerful experience.
I do. I have friends that do, and other people are like, what? And I'm like, they call me. I can't tell you anything else. But again, when you drop into that awareness, and I don't know if I've even ever told you, I've shared, but I'm a chef. So have been a chef as part of my career, amongst other things. But the mindfulness and being present, I'm like, I used to teach my own staff. I'm like, first of all, you have a knife in your hand. We need to be present. But then in order to engage with anything and to fully get into that, you need to be present, right? So yeah, you're not talking to the stranger of speaking to anything in the natural environment. But
I think cooking's a really good example. I actually use cooking as an example sometimes
yeah.
because if you're not paying attention when you're cooking, something goes wrong. You
Well,
know?
and I think it's like anything. It's like your practice mind. People have that expectation of what am I supposed to get out of this, right? Where when you say you take that element out, I love it because I'm sure people after the guided walks or with your guides probably are like, wow, right? Like there's that a whole experience that does happen, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure even teaching people to ground, I suspect there are people that can well up emotions within them that they never probably knew existed, depending. I mean, right? There's lots of things that can happen because they
Yeah.
are getting to that natural rhythm within them, right?
We'll often have strong emotional responses, particularly during the imaginal.
Yeah.
After the what's in motion when we're doing imaginal activities, one of the things that comes up pretty often when people talk to trees is grief. So people will come back to the circle and they'll be crying and they'll be having a grief experience. And, we train the guides. We say, yeah, just let them have it because don't comfort them or don't try to take it away or anything. Just bear witness because that grief a lot of times is a deep grief that's connected to environmental pain. And sometimes when a person is grieving in that circle, I feel like they're doing the work for all of us, and furthermore, we can trust their capacity to self-regulate. We can be in deep grief for 5 minutes and then just come out of it and move along, and there's no need to there's nothing to fix there, basically. And so the imaginal can also bring up joy and insight and mystical experiences. But I want to say, we tell the guides that it is not their business to have an agenda for what people should experience because we don't know.
Right.
We don't know when they come on that walk what they need. They may need to be bored and let them have a boring experience. They may need to have big grief. Let them have big grief. They may need to feel a sense of walking through the mind of God. Great, let them have that. But it's none of those experiences. It's not the business of the guide to value any of those experiences over any other. Our experience, we say the guide opens the doors. The forest is the therapist. The forest is the teacher. The forest. But we're gonna just get you in there. We open the doors, and the doors are simple. They're the doorways of the senses and the imagination. Those are the doors. And so we'll do a couple of these imaginal invitations usually. When I first started this, I thought I got to give people their money's worth, and I try to cram about 12 invitations in there. Everyone was exhausted, including me at the end. And I just noticed, the fewer we do, kind of the more people get out of it.
Yeah.
Nowadays, after what's in motion, a lot of times I'll just tell people, go hang out by the creek and see what happens. And I'll meet you in an hour up the hill for tea. But whatever it is we do, if there's time, we'll then do a sit spot. And this is really preferable and sit spot is just simple invitation, find a place and sit for 20 minutes. Now we don't burden that with, breathe in some special way or think about some particular thing, or just sit. And it tends to be incredibly enjoyable. And by maybe in the first 15 minutes, people's minds start racing and something happens where you get so comfortable just sitting in nature that when the guide calls you back, people are like, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. It's like, but we're on the clock here, and you can do this anytime. Then we bring them back and then we have tea. So, and this is something we always end with tea, and the guides take great pleasure in their tea ceremonies. In fact, if you go to our website, anft.earth, Go to that one. There's a page of photos of tea ceremony, tea setups the guides have. And that tea is sort of our time of coming out of the liminal experience of being on the walk and going back into more ordinary reality. It's literally incorporating it. If I'm making a tea out there with my little stove, I'm making it out of plants that I've gathered along the trail. It's part of the training we give guides is how to do that. And then by having that tea, we're literally incorporating our experience, sharing that together, then becomes a time of just discussion and the people
of connection.
Yeah.
We long for connection. The human spirit longs and has this innate need to connect, and we forget that. And for me, it's deepening our connection to nature and us as nature and nature itself. So that's so key. And I think the tea is just beautiful. I didn't know that was a part of it, but otherwise, we just jump right back into life, right? Yep. And forget to transition, right?
Every time it's tea and a little bit of snacks, because believe it or not, I mean, we didn't do anything hardly for the last 2 hours in terms of physical exercise, but people's blood sugar takes a big dip during that. I don't know what the physiology of that is. People need to eat at the end of these walks too. So we have snacks out there and some tea. You know, I learned this when I first heard about Shinrin-yoku. You know, this was in the time when I was asking myself after the Vision Fast, I said, what specifically can I do to connect people with nature? And this idea Shinrin-yoku came, you know, I read it somewhere and I got some bad information in whatever I read. It said the Japanese always end their Shinrin-yoku walks with a tea ceremony. I thought, okay, we'll end with tea. So that's fine. We won't try to do Japanese tea ceremony. Basically we're trying to have a practice that works culture, you know, in any culture it's in. Right. In fact, once I was guiding in, where was it? In Serbia, and instead of tea ceremony, we had this really, what's it called? Rakia, this really strong liquor. That was culturally appropriate for them.
And you're like, why not?
And I enjoyed it. It was a great connective time, you know, it was really good. So, so when I went to Japan, what I discovered is that they don't end with tea, but they do have tea and snacks in the middle of the walk usually. So they do some things, you know, differently than how we do it, how we train, but there's a lot of overlap in the practices.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it gets to the core of what they are doing. So when you are, though, making the tea, is it become more like a medicinal walk concept that you're teaching the medicine behind it, or no, just selecting?
That would be one time when we might teach about the medicine of the herb. See, for most of the walk, we're not doing any teaching that would put people in their heads,
right?
Because we're really trying to stay in the body. So we're not, you know, explaining that the name of this tree is so and so, and that bird is such and such. We're not doing any of that. We think that's really important to know. That's a different practice. Go out with a naturalist or go on those classes and know that it will actually deepen your enjoyment and the pleasure of your Shinrin-yoku practice or your forest bathing practice if you have some of that. Now, but that's not when we impart. On the other hand, the Japanese will do a little bit of naturalist training on their walks. They don't do a lot of it, but they do just a little bit of it. But where we say that's okay is at tea, because we're coming out of liminality. We're going back into the ordinary world. People get so dropped into this liminal space on some of these walks that it would almost be irresponsible to just put them in a car and send them out on the road. You know, so let's just be ordinary for a while. Let's get back into our heads. And so, like I say, I'm using a mixture of yarrow and mugwort. You know, that might be some typical things I've put in my tea. I'll talk about those, or very often I'll begin by asking the people in the group, what do you know about these plants? A lot of times there's people that come on these groups that know more than I do about them.
Okay.
So, yeah, so
then, now you've been here, so interestingly enough, I'm in Ottawa, Canada, which you know, and you actually came here, and we do have the program at what is called the Carp Ridge Eco Wilderness.
Wilderness.
Right.
Yeah.
Carp Ridge Eco Wilderness. And so they're doing the practice there, which is great. I mean, here in the city, I live in the city. We are very fortunate in Ottawa to be surrounded by, you know, the rivers and we've got lots of natural trails and stuff. But I still find it fascinating because a lot of people are out just biking on the trail and they're running through, right? Which is fine. We need to be out in nature as well.
Important practices, right? Those are important practices too, but it's not this practice.
Yeah, that's exercise in a different way, or a connection in a different way. Yours is a very deep sort of, connection. So let's talk about the book a bit, because in the book, it's there to help the individual as much as it is as the guide, because the guide and that type of thing is very separate from this book that you created.
Now, hang on a second. Let me just get a visual aid here.
Oh, perfect.
So this is the book we're talking about.
Yes.
Your Guide to Forest Bathing. Yeah, and you know, one of the stories of this is at a certain point when this started taking off, I started getting contacted by a bunch of publishers, and so did a number of the guides who I trained. And this publisher, Canary Press, said, look, we'll get your book out ahead of all the others. Because they're all very aware in the publishing industry. They're like, there's 9 of these under contract. We'll get yours out first. Okay. You got 6 weeks to write it.
Okay.
So for 3 of those weeks, I was in Japan, and I was so saturated with Japan that I couldn't write. So I came back and I wrote the book in 3 weeks, which actually served because I just, you know, sat down and wrote what I thought.
Well, and what you knew, not, again, when we say what we think, then that's up in the brain. This is what you knew and could totally, whatever word, channel somebody wants to use, they just
totally legit.
It was flowing out of you. So yeah, beautiful. I haven't read the book. I've read about the book, and just the, you know, the experiences that people can take, whether they're going through forests, woodlands, parks, that's all in there, right?
Yeah, yeah. Here, I'll just read a little section.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
So I just opened it random to this thing that says authentic relationship with nature. As a species, we have grown increasingly disconnected from the world that sustains us. Many of us never feel the joy of holding a handful of fresh dirt and reveling in its texture and smell. Our disconnect may be so established that we are averse to the idea of coming into contact with filthy dirt. It's a bit tragic, really. The world would be a barren place without dirt and rain and bacteria and insects. These relatives of ours have made our lives possible. This disconnection from nature also alienates us from ourselves. When our lives are insulated from the elements and from natural cycles, we become anesthetized, deadened to our senses, and find it increasingly difficult to connect to the central processes that allow us to feel joy, delight, and surprise. Our life force is diminished. So there's a couple of random paragraphs from the book.
And all kinds of things. My head just goes, yes.
Yeah,
and the life force. It's the breath. It's the chi. It's the life force. Whatever those words are for people. And again, I as I intro this, I get it. I love it, and I'm so thrilled that there's people like yourself that are out there sharing it in a different way. And again, however people choose to go out in nature, it's there, right? And you're making just a beautiful invitation for people to say, try this practice in a whole different way, because you do connect. Our bodies inherently know, right? We are that dirt, that nature, that everything, right? So yeah, it's so beautiful.
Yeah, dirt's one of my favorite things to play with when I'm out guiding. In fact, you know, in a circle, we'll pass a talking piece around. A lot of times I'll just pick up a handful of dirt, and that's what we'll pass around. And then at the end of the circle, I'll just invite everyone, look, just, you know, smell the aroma of the dirt that's left on your hands and enjoy that, because it's such a beautiful smell. I mean, it's so rich. Like, I'm getting started on that.
No, you're not. You're talking to the right girl. I mean, I grew up in the country. My parents were farmers. They moved off, whatever. But I have many people, I mean, so just even the other day, we've got a really cold snap here in Ottawa, and not even that cold as normal, but I'm like, and a friend of mine who's not as much of a lover of the winter, they're from Cuba, so certainly the ocean and the heat is definitely more their style. But I said, God, if everybody could just understand the clarity of the true smell of nature after a snow, after a rainfall, in the spring, when the dirt, when you smell the fish that aren't even coming up yet, I'm like, I'm that. I mean, as a child, I would, the critters, the frogs, the caterpillars, my mother would say, did you leave your friends outside? Because they were in my pockets, and if I didn't, they were at the table. So I get it. But I
was worried about me getting started, but I can see I got you started on that.
You got me started, so don't.
Yeah.
But I think it's, no, but here's the thing. There's something in that, and starting it in the true essence of it for parents and us as adults, we did do, and especially us as adults, we did do that as kids. It's kids in these last sort of 20, 30 years that didn't experience it. It's coming back, and it's saying, honor that. Touch a tree, touch the dirt, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Because again, we are fortunate. We have water, wash it off. You take a shower every day after you sleep, and you didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Right? So then where will your adventures take you next, shall we say, when COVID's over? I mean, you continue to teach the programs, or do you often, you're called out more to speak and share the wisdom that you've gained?
Well, I do get invited to speak at conferences quite a bit, so I'll travel around to speak at conferences. I was scheduled in 2020 to speak in Korea and Portugal and so on, but that didn't happen. And I'm hoping that that'll happen again, because one of the really pleasant parts of this work for me has been that I've got to travel the world. I've never really traveled the world much. And so I've seen a lot of beautiful places. Now, what I'm focusing on is more retreats now. So I do these retreats that are 4 to 5 days. They're not specifically for training guides, though many of the guides who we've trained will come to these retreats. And also many of the people come to the retreats and then decide to go on and train as guides. I have one at Hollyhock, which is a really beautiful retreat center on Cortez Island in British Columbia, scheduled in March. So that's called Alchemy of Forest Bathing. And this is something that I've become really interested in, is this notion of the forest itself acting as an alchemist, in which we are an ingredient being transformed through this practice. And I got interested in this because I was noticing many people reporting these transformative experiences, and I'm kind of a skeptic. And I'd hear this and I'd say, yeah, well, maybe they're just exaggerating. But I started hearing it enough that I thought, I probably ought to pay attention to this. And in my academic training is as a therapist, it's in psychology, and I've always been very interested in the work of Carl Jung, among others. And Jung really kind of brought back into the realm of the legitimate realm of inquiry, the idea of alchemy, psychological alchemy. And so I'll be exploring that more. I imagine my next book will probably have some alchemical themes in it. Nice. And I also, when I travel around, I also I work with guides in different parts of the world to set up gatherings of guides. So it's basically like just a little impromptu retreat where the local guides get together. Is the background noise a bother?
I hear it, but it's light. That's okay. We don't make anything out specifically.
All right. Okay.
So when you're having people,
just check on it. Be sure you get contact information.
Yeah, they're going to come by with their card. Should I give them extra medium?
Yeah, give them a little here. This too. Yeah. sorry, we had these guys show up this morning when I was shoveling snow, and they offered to let me hire
to do
them.
your work, so it's beautiful. That's fabulous.
And
That's
they
really
did an incredible job, and they're done. They just finished up now, so we're
okay.
giving our cash gratitude.
Exactly.
We fed them a delicious stew that I made yesterday, so they got that already.
That's so good.
Too.
So then, if I came to you, I want to use something which is, if I, as an individual, so somebody here watching might be like, wow, I didn't know that there's either you know, a guided sort of group that's here in my own neighborhood. Would you recommend to people first do some kind of search on your own website? And or do you encourage there to be 2, 3, 4 different organizations, right? Like, so using my here in Ottawa, would I go to the Carp Wellness Center and say, hey, you're doing it there, but we'd love to have one on the east end because they're on the other end. Is that sort of how you guys?
Just find people who are trained, however, and have their. I mean, the guides who we train don't work for us.
Okay.
They find their own way.
Okay.
And I'd say there are now about 8 other training organizations that were founded by guides who we've trained.
Okay, very good.
And there are many businesses, hundreds of businesses founded by guides who we've trained. And we're also working on expanding a series of certified forest bathing trails. And spots like, Carp Ridge Eco Wellness Center would be a example of a place that's really ideally suited. You can go to our website and find guides through our website. You can do a search there and see if you can find one in your area. You might come across other organizations. The main thing I would say is that I feel good about the organizations that were founded by guides who were trained by us. They don't teach. Every one of them kind of takes the practice, like the standard sequence or whatever it is, and they tweak it and they make it theirs. And that's really important. Like, even though we offer the standard sequence, part of what I tell guides is, I'm not here to train you to guide like I guide. I'm here to train you to guide like you guide. Right? So you're guiding in your own voice, in your own way. It's got to come from your authentic presence.
However,
presence and connection. Is there?
That's okay. There's a bit of a lag. Go ahead.
Okay. The thing I might caution about is there are a couple of training organizations that do a weekend training and call people certified forest therapy guides. And I've had reports back from people who've gone on walks guided by those people, and they've said that the experiences have not been satisfying. So so they're just like with everything else. There are qualitative differences.
Right. Well, and like any business that you're going out and that type of thing. I mean, it's so first thing, which is people go out, walk. I mean, I could take my own and say, hey, let's go. I would come from a very different, because I would be into the playful, let's talk, what do you see, what's it saying to you, right? I would go that route. But I love that there's an actual sort of, I will say, certification to really get people to understand the depth of the slow down practice, the inherent emotions that can come from this, because it truly is its own healing mechanism. And to your comment that you hope after COVID things get better, I think you're in for a boom in terms of people know that nature she's been doing her magic, right? She's been working her magic, and there will be a beautiful clarity that comes out once this lifts. However, I think there's something to be said. Don't wait for it to lift. It's already lifting in different parts, and people, where they can start looking, if they're interested, to go down this, to look at your association. And I will share all of that information because I think it's absolutely beautiful. Any other, and we'll share also the information about Hollyhock, whether that is able to continue in March or not. But we'll be curious to see how your retreats go. And I think retreats in general, people know the beautiful aspect of getting out in nature. There are people that certainly want to just get out and lie on the beach. That's not what we're talking here. We're talking get out and engage with the beauty of all of the planets and how that feeds you. But are there any lasting sort of aspects you would love to leave with people? Because we're talking on many levels, but this is about self-love. This entire experience and our time together is to really share with people the importance of self-love and how nature adds that element to you, how we revitalize. You've spoken of joy. What is this sort of maybe overall lasting sort of theme or
Yeah, I think the last thing I would say to people is to really view this practice as relational. In other words, you're not going out there and doing a practice based on your own inner ideas and knowing, but you learn to go out and have the practice be one in which you are guided, not just by a human guide if you're there, in which you're guided by all the other human beings around you. Very important to allow your imagination to be open the lines of communication between your heart and what the other beings are suggesting. There's all these whispers going on all around you all the time. It may be as simple as, wow, that's a pretty stone. I want to hold it and see what that feels like. Think of that as the stone offering itself to you. It's infinite. The invitations that are out there, they never stop. So think of it as a partnership practice.
I love it. And I'm glad you brought that part up. Of course, it can trigger all kinds of things, but I do want to sort of ask when, let's say you wanted to go out with some friends to do this, and I might not just say friends, because adults can sort of, and I should say, or I want to say, they know to separate themselves and can, maybe not, they want to cling and they want to talk and they want to whatever, but do you bring children into this? Do you invite them to be playful within this, or to bring them into a really calm-centered space as you are with an adult?
Yeah, it's when we do these practices with children, and families can be really fun to do this. One of the things we really emphasize is that it's invitations. We're not giving assignments. And so children will very pleasures of presence. It doesn't keep them engaged. They'll walk up and do something else, and that's just fine while we're doing that, right? But there are some invitations that we've developed that guides have found work really, really well for children, keep them very engaged. So knowing what those are. In terms of working with, say, couples, what will often happen in that sharing where we say, what are you noticing? Couples will connect with each other and communicate in ways that they maybe haven't for years. It's a really powerful thing to watch. And it's so simple, none of us are saying, let's do couples therapy,
right?
but we're just trusting in the power of the practice and of the forest or whatever environment. And by the way, this can be done in any environment. My wife and I were snorkeling in Hawaii a couple of years ago, and I got into this water and it was really deep, and I had a lot of anxiety. I wanted to get right back out. I was kind of scared. And then I thought, why don't I just do pleasures of presence? So I started going through all of my senses, and I got so relapsed. I was the last one back on the boat. Let's do what, imagine this. Let's do what's in motion, snorkeling through the coral reefs. Just very slowly going through, noticing what's in motion. So that's very rich. And of course we do this in deserts and, wherever we do it. So
I love it. So there's so much there. So it's the invitation, and it's the notice what's in motion, and, slowing yourself down. So Amos, this is just fabulous. I thank you so much. And I know that we will be sharing some more of Amos's stuff with all of you. And this entire thing is just an opportunity to truly use what Amos has been sharing with us and connect with yourself. So thank you again very much. Enjoy your time in Arizona, and separate from what California was. Now that you've
Yeah.
got some snow and you're looking forward to the Arizona sun, I did not know that it could snow in Arizona. So there you go.
I didn't know it could snow like this here for sure. Well, thank you so much, Donna, and thank you to anyone who's taken the time to watch this interview. I know you've had a lot of other ways you could be using your time, and I'm truly grateful that you used it in this way. Hope to see you on the trail someday.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you.